Hello and welcome you all to this new lecture which we are covering that is biofarming, and today we will discuss about the manures. Now manures, there are different types of manures, how they can be applied, what are the benefits of adding manure to the crop. These things we will discuss, and what are the different ways of generating manures and say preserving it for long-term use. These things we will also discuss in this particular lecture. So to start with, basically we all know what manure is. It's basically we use animal feces like cow dung, cow urine. These things with the mixture of straws can be used as a manure, right? But there are basically two different kind of manures which you can say. One is called this manure, which is generally farmyard manure, which is generated from the livestock manure, from the cow dung, cow urine, and the other waste material of the dairy or the poultry, right? From that, if it is completely decomposed in a systematic way, it can be added to the soil and it can work as a manure. Second kind of manure is this one, which is called as green manure. In this kind of manure, which we use, we generally uproot the plants, and these uprooted plants are generally kept in the field for longer time so that they can decay and get mixed with the top layer of the soil. Basically, when they mix with the soil, the top layer of soil, they work as a mulching agent, right? So there is a mulch layer that is being made, and that mulch layer helps in slowly mixing the decayed leaf parts into the soil and working as a manure. Generally, for generating green manure, we use cover crops like those kind of crops which are not very useful for consuming purpose. But when there is a free time in the field, when there is no cropping time in the field, at that time these kind of cover crops can be grown, and these kind of green manures can be generated. So there are two different kind of manure. One is called farmyard manure, and second is called as the green manure. Right. Now, organic manure, what is the importance of it? We need to understand it. Basically, organic manures, they not only add nutrient to the soil, but they do other kind of important things also. Like they work as a buffering, they work as a buffering action to protect the crops from different level of pH changes, right? Rapid fluctuation in the pH changes in the soil, if it's happening, and you are constantly adding manure into the soil, that means it will be uh, acting as a buffer to control that change in the soil. Apart from it, the manure also helps in higher microbiological activity in the soil of the good bacteria, good fungal activities if it is there, right? For that to be at the maximum, this kind of manures are added. Now, it is very important to note here also that not only these things, but organic manure also improves the soil texture. Soil texture is improved by constant adding of organic manure. It helps improve the water holding capacity of the soil. Water retention is improved in the soil so that if the water retention is more water is available for the plants. Aeration of soil is improved. Drainage of the soil, drainage properties of the soil is also improved, and uh, if the manure is constantly added and presence of earthworms are there, it can help in generating humus also, which will give the dark color to the soil also. Apart from it, then organic manure also helps in contributing nutrients to the soil, is a general term, but other terms like improving the soil stability, buffering action of soils, and increasing the microbiological activity of soil. These are the main things that the addition of organic manure does in a soil. Apart from it, if you are using organic manure in which a lot of leguminous plants are there, then these leguminous plants, they can easily be degraded, and all the nitrogen which is fixed with them can be returned back to the soil. As I told you, that nitrogen is one of the macronutrients which are required and provided by the fertilizer. These kind of chemical fertilizer needs can be reduced if we use leguminous plants as a source of manure also. Now, generally, the farmyard manure which we generate, it could be a fresh farmyard manure, it could be stockpiled for longer period of time, It could be liquid kind of manure and which is called as slurry, right? Now, slurry is a liquid kind of manure in which urine is separately collected from the livestock, or urine is mixed with the cow dung or waste material of the livestock, and it can be used for a long-term purpose. Now, this stockpiled or fresh slurry, this is a source of nitrogen, but slurry as such, the liquid manure, which is called as liquid manure also, which is the easiest way of applying nitrogen into a field. But if you are raising the livestock manure in a structure like this, which you can see it here, this is called as a stockpiled one, right? By adding layer by layer of manures like this, there are chances that if you are keeping it in the open, there are ample amount of chances that nitrogen can easily be lost from these kind of manure. So nitrogen loss from these kind of manures are done by two ways. One is called as leaching and one is called as volatilization. Now leaching is, that means from this stockpiled manure, slowly the nitrogen, the water soluble nutrients will go down into the surface and it will be leached down into the surface, right? And volatilization means when, because the surface is open, easily the nitrogen can go up. The volatility of the nitrogen in form of ammonia and other gases can easily be done, right? This way nitrogen can also be lost. So it is very important here to note that how to manage the slurry, how to keep the slurry safe so that the leaching loss and volatilization loss is less from the stockpiled slurry, which manure which you are generating. So basically, there could be three categories of manures. One is called farmyard manure, which general manure, which we are discussing about. Second is slurry or liquid manures, right? Which is the easiest way of providing the nutrients to the crops, because slurry or liquid manures, they contain mostly urine or liquid part more. It is easily available. The nitrogen is easily available in these kind of manure samples. And third is brought in organic manure, in which category the sewage manure also comes. Sewage manure means all the sewage material, household waste, human waste, industrial waste, can that be converted into the manure? That concept we will also discuss one by one. So basically, farmyard manure, it consists of the waste material of livestock, which is called animal excreta. But if you are carefully raising the manure through this method, then you should also have a slight amount of bedding material also. Now, bedding material, usually the straw material, it is added to the this kind of manures for long-term storage of these manures, right? So bedding material or straw material in varying stages of decompositions are deliberately added to the animal excreta while creating a heap, so that for long-term use, these kind of manures can be used. If immediately it is a requirement, or higher nitrogen absorbance is the requirement from the manure, then you can use only animal excreta also. Uh, Another different kind of manure which is nowadays have a buzz is poultry manure, which is becoming important as it is in-house air dried manure from the deep pit houses. Now, when we talk about the composition of manure, we should also talk about certain things like efficient nitrogen availability from the manure, controlling nitrogen loss, which is, as I told you, from volatilization and leaching, and control of toxic elements, which is very important. If you are generating a manure in organic farming or biofarming, which for which you are bringing the material from industry, like if you are using a poultry industry which is not following by organic farming norms, or you are generating some kind of waste material for manure generation from a livestock industry which is not following the biofarming norm, then these kind of industries, as I told you in the previous lecture also, they use different kind of antibiotics, banned drugs, hormones, and heavy metals, right? So while generating the manure also, these kind of presence of heavy materials, heavy metals like zinc, antibiotics like bacitracin, and toxic elements will be present in your manure. So to check all these things is very important while generating a farmyard manure for your organic purposes. The second part of this is management of farmyard manure. Management of farmyard manure is done by basic methods like composting, cold and warm manures, sheet composting, which is a very basic technique of which is also called as no gardening technique, and how to preserve the manure for long-term uses by the management of these farmyard manures. We will discuss. Now, as far as the composition of farmyard manure is concerned, as I told you, that bedding material and the animal excreta plays a very important role. And the ratio of this bedding material and animal excreta, if it is perfect, then only this manure can be used for a long-term storage. Now, carbon upon nitrogen ratio. The carbon upon nitrogen ratio plays a very important role in this. If the bedding material in the manure is more, then that means the carbon upon nitrogen ratio is more, right? So a fresh manure which without straw increases yield of plants, whereas high carbon content with high straw can depress yields, right? But uh, uh, just opposite of it is that high carbon content helps in storing the manure for longer period of time also, right? So because animals are kept on different bedding materials in varying quantities, and livestock are kept on different diets, the nutrient content of these kind of manures, they vary, right? So if it depends upon what basically is your aim. If you want to use generate a manure which is for longer period of time, then the carbon upon ratio, nitrogen ratio should be higher. So most of the nitrogen loss which is happening in these kind of heaps is by volatilization and leaching. And generally, ammonia is the most common form of gas which is converted and lost. While if the heap is being removed one by one, it's very easy for the ammonia to be lost through volatilization, right? So to control these kind of nitrogen loss through leaching and volatilization, the carbon upon nitrogen ratio plays a very important role. Higher carbon upon nitrogen ratio up to 40 results in lower loss of nitrogen from the these kind of heaps which are used for manure generation. Right. Toxic elements, if they are present, as I told you, if your waste material is coming from an industry, a poultry industry, or a livestock industry, or a piggeries, right, then there are chances that you will have lot of presence of heavy material, like heavy metals like copper uh, presence will be there in the manure. Then zinc presence will also be there. High dry matter could be there because they use certain antibiotics like bacitracin, that can also be there. Zinc presence can be there, right? So these ethically unacceptable livestock systems waste material cannot be used in biofarming, so that because ultimately whatever manure you will generate, it has to be applied to the soil. So all these copper, zinc, high dry matter, and banned antibiotics will go into the ultimately into the soil. So battery cages, intensive pig units, from these units, we generally avoid the samples to generate the. So if your manure has presence of higher amount of heavy metals like copper, this shows its effect on certain animals if they are grazing on these kind of manure generated plants. Like sheep. Sheep shows generally copper toxicity a lot, right? So the purpose of saying all these things is that if you are using a manure, use it from a source which is completely free from heavy metals, antibiotics, and other materials which are used in the industry. So, management of the farmyard manures can be done by different ways, depending upon your need. You can create aerobic atmosphere, anaerobic atmosphere, or both in the manure. There are different ways of doing it. So one of the basic technique of farmyard manure management is no dig gardening technique, or it is also called as sheet composting, in which generally the farmyard manure is kept and allowed to interact with the soil, and this interaction helps in creating a mulch effect. That means the farmyard manure, which is kept in on the soil surface, it interacts and kind of it makes a very fine layer of a manure into the soil, which is called as mulch layer, right? This mulch layer slowly provides the nutrient to the soil. This kind of technique also provides anti-phytopathogenic effect into the soil, and slowly, because this process is very slow, it helps in increasing the microbiological activity also. And basically, it's a no dig gardening technique, and it basically mimics the natural forest process. So this is a very basic technique which is called as sheet composting to manage the farmyard manure application into the soil. Second management technique is farmyard manure management through stored manures. Like this, stockpiled heaps are generated with the straw materials, right? So basically, the urea which is present in these kind of heaps, they convert into ammonium compounds. The carbohydrate which is present, they are fermented, which results in heat generation inside these kind of heaps, which this heat helps in decay of the richer nitrogen, and the nitrogen is easily available when it is exposed to the heat conditions. Then drawback of this kind of heat is buildup of toxic gases and compounds. Toxic gases like H2S, hydrogen sulfide, methane. Then exposure to leaching and nasty smell and nutrient loss are general drawbacks of this kind of manures. Now, there are two different kind of approaches to generate these kind of manure. One is called cold manure and one is called warm manure. Cold manure, it's mostly it creates a kind of anaerobic condition by carefully stacking the manure onto one onto another and building a total heap, right? Inside the heap, the temperature is generally 30-degree temperature, 30 degrees centigrade, right? And it's basically the advantage of cold manure is that volatilization loss through ammonia is minimum, because a lot of layers of carefully stacked manure is generated in this kind of technique. But the disadvantage of cold manure is that while removing the heap for the use, there is a greater loss. There are chances of greater loss of nitrogen on spreading of this manure. Second approach is called as warm manure approach, in which aerobic and anaerobic both the conditions are there in the heap. Why anaerobic and aerobic both the conditions are there? Because there is a gradual addition of layers into the manure. One layer, then second layer, and then third layer. So top layers are mostly aerobic, and the inside layer they are anaerobic. So the outer layer generally they are of the temperature of 40 to 50 degrees centigrade, right? And the lower layer, inside layer, they are almost 30-degree temperature, right? And they become anaerobic. Now, these kind of warm manure approaches, they are a kind of advantageous in maintaining greater carbon content. Weed seeds and pathogens which are present, because of the higher temperature, they get killed inside these kind of heaps. Now, weed seed killing is also very effective in cold manure also. So this advantage is same in both the approaches. But warm manure generation is a bit tedious as compared to the cold manure, as it is more labor intensive. Okay, the second different kind of manure is slurry. Slurry, as I told you, it mostly contains urine samples and less amount of the livestock waste. Now, slurry or liquid manures, they are easy to apply, but storing them for longer period of time is difficult, because they cannot be stored as a heap. So they are kept in large tanks, and because they are kept in large tanks, they create certain problems of crust formation. Now, slurry and liquid manures basically they are associated with, as I told you, slurry storage is a problem. Aeration of slurry is a problem. If slurry, because it is liquid in nature, aeration is not done, then there are certain very toxic gases like butyric acid, or hydrogen sulfide or methane gases can easily be created inside the slurry, and that is not good for the soil in which you are going to apply these kind of slurry, because toxic material, if you will apply it onto the soil, it may kill the earthworms there. Presence of these kind of toxic material in the sample may kill the earthworms, or it may disturb the soil ecosystem also, right? This is how a slurry, you can see, is applied onto the field, right? And these are the tanks in which they are stored. Now, these above ground tanks, they are used for storage of slurry, but the advantage is that disadvantage is that it creates a kind of thick crust on the top layer of the slurry. Because of the thick crust, anaerobic conditions are created into the slurry tanks, and because of anaerobic conditions, higher ammonia or other compounds can be generated into the slurry. Also, weed growth is also possible in these kind of tanks because the temperature maintenance is not there. And while pumping the or spreading the slurry also in the field, these kind of weed growth can easily be transferred from the tanks to the field. This is one more photograph showing the slurry in a covered area. Now, these different kind of gases which mistakenly can be generated into the slurry because of the mismanagement, which is ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, carbon dioxide, and methane. Right? This can be a little bit reduced if aeration is provided into the slurry, constant aeration is provided, and covering of slurry can be done from the top, right? So these things, if we are doing it successfully, we can use slurry for longer period of time. Aeration can be provided into the slurry by batch culture or continuous flow, right? Before application of slurry, there shall be a mechanical separation or a seepage of slurry shall be done so that the liquid material and the hard material can both be separated. The sludge material is the hard material and the liquid material is the sludge material, the slurry material. This can be separated, and efficiently then the slurry can be used for the purpose of application into the field. Another approach of dealing with these kind of slurry materials is anaerobic digesters, which are used to create biogas through by the use of these liquid kind of manures. The sludge treated by biogas, it has little odor and it can be used for slurry material. And these big tanks, you can see it here. These are called as methane digesters, in which the slurry can be kept, and it's a production of methane under deliberate oxygen exclusion, and temperature is kept around 30 degrees in these kind of tanks, right? In these methane digester tanks, this slurry material can be used for biogas production, and the rest of the material which is left, the hard material, the sludge, this sludge, digested sludge, is a stabilized organic fertilizer with most of the NPK of the original slurry. This can also be used. The disadvantage of these kind of anaerobic digesters or methane digesters is that immediately you can't use these kind of slurry, the sludge, and you need to further store it with the risk of higher nitrogen loss. And then there are certain contaminant gases which comes up when you store this sludge for longer period of time. These contaminant gases are carbon dioxide and hydrogen sulfide gases. Then third kind of organic manure is brought in organic manure, in which sewage sludge is one of the prominent one. Now, sewage sludge can be used as a manure generation source, but the thing is that the all the human waste which is there in sewage sludge, it has higher amount of nitrogen. It contains nitrogen and phosphate, but the potash level is little bit less. Now, the brought in organic manure, the concept is that all the sewage material can be converted into the manure. But this comes with a bigger problem. If you are talking about the sewage sludge, whole sewage sludge conversion into manure, then it comes up with the bigger problems of presence of pathogen load, presence of heavy metal load, and presence of organic pollutants, which will be there if you use the complete sewage sludge for organic manure generation. If you will apply these kind of manures into the crops, it will affect the crops and the livestock as well as the human beings also, and it will also affect the soil microbiology and nitrogen fixing bacteria. Wherever this sewage sludge based manures are used, it is found that the reduction in the biomass after the application of sewage sludge has been found. So it is said that the organic brought in organic manures, if we are talking about this topic, then we should be extremely careful in separating the household human waste from the industrial waste. If we can separate these two, household waste with the industrial waste, then these kind of sewage sludge, this brought in organic manure can be applicable option to generate the manure. Another alternative to the organic manure is other organic manures and mineral fertilizers. Now, these kind of mineral fertilizers, these are inorganic substances which are mostly salts containing nutrients required by the plants, right? Such as potassium salts which are available. Now, these kind of mineral fertilizers, they shall not be seen as a straightforward alternative to the conventional fertilizers, but they can be seen as a supplement to the nutrient cycling, right? So these different kind of fertilizers, such as mineral fertilizers, sewage-based fertilizers, organic manures, farmyard manures, or slurry manures, or green manures, these all have been discussed in this lecture, and how they can be stored, how they can be used with the straw material for longer time, longer purpose use, and what are their importance. We have discussed in this lecture. I hope this lecture will help you in understanding the manures and their types in a much more better way. Thank you for watching.